I'm going to show how to make this wave gradient using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. I'm going to do a series of videos on different types of gradients, and I thought I'd start off with this nice simple one. This one is pretty easy to implement. All of them are going to use sort of a similar technique where I'm going to create a grayscale pattern and then add a gradient map adjustment on top of that. So to get started, I'm going to start with a new document, and that's going to be, I'll make it 1024 by 1024 pixels, and it needs to be in RGB format. I'll create that one, and then I'm just going to choose the black background color. Sort of like to work with that and fill it with black, and then choose my move tool, and then I'm going to go over here to the live filters, and all the way at almost to the bottom is the procedural texture live filter. I'll add that, and I'll move this over a little bit so I can see it while I'm working on it. To get started, I'm going to start with a single equation and a single custom input. I'll choose the real number custom input, A. I'll just set that to 1. And then for this one, I'm going to assign it to all 3 red, green, and blue channels. And I'm going to set this up as osc, an oscillator that goes from, I'll choose Rx, relative x, and times my custom input A, and divide by the width of the document in pixels, W. And let's see how that looks. Okay, so I have my oscillator just goes back and forth between 1 and 0 in a linear fashion. So if I increase my A value, you can see that it goes from 0 up to 1. And at 0, it's the darkest brightness, and then up at 1, it's the most intense. So I have it assigned to all 3 channels, and you could select these. But rather than using these channels to control the colors, I'm going to use a gradient map instead. If I were to change this to RY, then I would have horizontal stripes. I'm just going to leave it as RX for now. The next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and add my gradient map adjustment on top of this so I can start to see the colors. And I'm going to go with a gradient map. Got a bunch of gradients set up in here. Here's one I just put in. And so there you can sort of see the gradient already. Now it inserted it above the layer, but I'd sort of like to have it built into the layer. If I drag it down, it jumps down like that. So if I just position it just right, it'll include it in the layer, so I can sort of toggle this on or off. Everything's all in a nice little package there. All right, I'm going to show how to make the gradient map, and so I'm going to add the default gradient map. So if you add an adjustment, just do the default. Looks sort of like that. And rather than try to make up my own gradient pattern, I'm going to go out to the internet, and they've got a lot of different cool patterns out there, and so I'm just going to choose one from the internet that I think looks nice, color combination. So I'm going to choose this one, and so to enter this, I'm going to choose the first color over here, select that, and I'm going to make sure that this, usually I have this over in HSL mode, but I'm going to change that to RGB hex sliders because most of these gradients on the internet are in hex. Now I'm going to choose the first color. I'm going to choose sort of a garish one here. So that is FF21 8C. I'm going to put in FF21 8C. Let's see if that looks right. Yeah, so that's sort of a bright pink, and then a yellow over here in the middle. and that one is FFD800. So down here I can put in FFD800 and hit enter. And then the last one, this is sort of a pale blue, 21B1FF. So down here I'm going to put in 21B1FF and hit enter to lock that in. So there's my color palette. It's sort of, I'd like to have a little bit more control over this, and one of the ways I can do that is to add a couple more variables, custom inputs here. I'm going to add one, I'm going to call it fader. I'm going to call this one the scale. I'm going to call this one the fader, because I'm going to use it to sort of fade it in and out. And then this one's going to be I'll use the letter OF for the variable and call this one offset. So I do this quite a bit in quite a few of my procedural textures. I'll add a multiplier on this I and then add an offset to it. And I like the I to go from 0 to 1, the offset to go from -1 to 1, so I can sort of ramp this down and then control where it is with this one. Now to make it just a little bit more unique, I'm going to add a second oscillator, and I'm going to actually put this one inside the other oscillator. So I'll just do an OSC. And this one I'm going to have RY times A divided by W, and I'm going to add it to this other oscillator. And now if I change the scale on this, you can see I've got these two oscillators working together. I can sort of control them. Probably I want to zoom in quite a bit for these, and I have two different oscillators. Now if I change this to a SC, an S curve, it has this nice smooth curve, and also if I change this one to an S curve, it will smooth that out a little bit more. So there's my basic wave oscillator. If I wanted some more control, I'm going to add another control. This B, I'm going to have that set up for wavelength. And so the larger I make this, the longer this wave gets. I'm just going to zoom out to show how that works. And so I'm going to divide in here A divided by W. I'm also going to divide by B, my wavelength. And so as I bring this up, it sort of stretches that out a little more. And then I also want to control the amplitude, and so I'm going to multiply this times C and add another one, another real number, custom input, and we'll have this as the amplitude of the wave. And then I can just set that up so I can make those higher like that. And then the last thing I'm going to do is add a I1, which will be a fader, but this time for the wave amplitude. So I'm going to do this, let's call it wave height. So this one sort of controls the maximum amplitude. And then the other one, this one will be a fine adjustment on it. So I'm going to multiply this one over here. I1 times that, and so I can, go all the way down to 0 or bring this up. Okay, and so it gives you sort of a flexible little gradient system you can use here, and my gradient, if I wanted to, one other thing, if I wanted to save this, I could add that to presets. Now right now I don't remember what I called my last presets, so I'm going to look at them. And I've just been calling them G1 through whatever. So the last one was G7, so I'm going to call this one G8. So I saved my preset. Also, if I wanted to, I could save this gradient, and so I'm going to have created a category for my gradients down here, and I'm just going to call this Wave Gradient. Now another thing I could do is for this one, I could change this waveform, and so again I already did the the linear one, but there's a whole bunch of different oscillators. And so do the RT, which looks like that. So this one has sort of 2 points on it, but you could control these oscillators as well and get a variety of different sort of effects with changing the type of oscillator. All right, let me know if you have any comments or questions, and thanks for watching.